Hello, my name is Jana Skokan. I'm the co-founder of Frogeex. I want to welcome you and thank you for joining our Frogeex YouTube channel today. If you like the content that we're sharing and the ideas that we're discussing, please like it, comment on it, and share it. And most importantly, come and join us on our live events. You have the opportunity to discuss with experts, exchange with like-minded people, and expand your perspectives all around topics related to sustainable building, sustainable living. And I also want to encourage you to click the little notification bell, subscribe to our channel, and never ever miss another episode of Frogeex Green Tech Talks in the future. I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next one. Have a great day. Thank you very much to everybody for joining us today in our Frogeex Green Tech Talk. Today, it's my pleasure to welcome Mr. Christopher Kuntz, the president of Canwindpower with us, and we're going to discuss wind energy projects or wind energy generation in our call today with a special focus on offshore projects. So just to give everybody in the call a quick introduction on what Mr. Kuntz is doing, on what Chris is doing. He is for something over 23 years now active and working in the wind energy sector, working on different projects of different scale. Apparently, this bigger scale, larger scale projects are of special interest, especially for Canwindpower. If I recall that right, you're with the same company for a longer time. So basically also on the path of seeing the sector from different perspectives and also evolving in this quite lengthy period of time. Now, why we have the call today together. As you know, Frogeex is a green tech marketplace. We are bringing together experts and businesses from all over the world, looking at solutions and products in a sustainable building and sustainable living segment. Now, energy generation is a huge chunk. It's a huge part of the challenge. And we know that wind energy is certainly part of the solution. We see, and I'm really looking forward to your presentation, Christopher, my apologies, because there are many trends, and I'm happy that you can share with us, what are the implications, what is the context of it. So would you like to maybe tell 2-3 words before we go into the presentation till I pull it up on the screen?
Sure, please. So yes, Jana, I have been at this for in excess of 20 years. Mm-hmm. And I should say that I'm not a preeminent authority on offshore wind power. Mm-hmm. What I do know is that I was early on in my career exposed to the offshore wind turbines being installed on the coast of Belgium. Mm-hmm. And that when I was selling wind turbines for Repower, now Senvion and Siemens Gamesa, they had engineers with drawings of what was, to me at the time, just unthinkable. They had 10 megawatt wind turbines being drawn out on their design tables. And so it's always been on my radar. And so the purpose of this presentation is just to create a little bit of debate and awareness about offshore wind and wind power patterns in general for the future. So let's just dive into this. The first
maybe Christopher, sorry to interrupt you, just maybe one organizational point. So for everybody watching, you can use the chat function for your questions, for submitting your questions. We will look at them at the end of the presentation. We have a quick run through or a presentation of the points that Christopher is about to share with us. And afterwards, we're going to take the questions. So please keep them with you till the end. Thank you.
Okay, so the concept of an offshore wind turbine was actually an American thing. It's somewhat ironic because it seems as if the United States is a bit slow to the gate in terms of installing offshore wind power. But in actual fact, it was the Danes who took the concept and turned it into reality. And as is often the case, Denmark has been a pioneer in terms of wind turbine design and manufacturing. A lot of their components are made offshore in other parts of the world, but the design and the principles of an offshore wind turbine are very much Danish. Second slide or third slide. This map here shows you pretty much where the development of offshore wind turbines will be in Europe, the little red dots on the top left-hand corner. And it's largely, I mean, this is like sort of like an early map, but, you know, France just made this massive announcement that they were going to install 40 gigs of offshore wind turbine. President Macron, I think it was just this week. So, you know, you can add more dots to the map off the coast of France just from this one announcement. The point here is that it's growing. The industry will continue to grow. Maybe not all of these areas will be developed, but certainly a lot of them will. And then in the bottom left corner, that is Long Island, New York. And the United States has big plans to build offshore as well. And you can see that they've clearly allowed for shipping channels to bypass the wind turbines, so that because it's a massive port. But the wheels are in motion. These things are being planned. And actually they were being planned 10 or 20 years ago. It's just that the economics make sense today, which sort of leads us to the bar graphs on the bottom right-hand corner, which clearly stipulates that, you know, the lion's share of wind power development to 2045 will go to offshore and onshore developments as well. But I think specifically, you're going to see a lot of the money going offshore. The current cost of installing a megawatt onshore versus onshore is such that the cost of going offshore is about 3 times the cost of going onshore. But this will drop as volume of installations go up, the cost will come down. I think that number is kind of a couple of years old. It's not a current number. Slide number 4, please. Can we go down to the slide past that?
Yep.
Oh, sorry, I'm not seeing your screen. But if we're on the slide that's colored blue and it says why onshore and why offshore?
Yes, that's true. That's true. It's
okay.
Awesome. We cannot see my screen, but yeah.
Awesome. As long as we're on the same slide.
We are on why onshore and why offshore is the right thing to do.
Okay. So the onshore turbines are quick and easy to install relative to offshore. You know, if you're going to build a nuclear reactor, you could be looking at 10, 15, 20 years of construction. An onshore wind turbine can be planned, designed, permitted, and erected in 2 years. Sometimes longer, depends on the permitting process, but it's relatively quick. Offshore wind turbines have the advantage of being more efficient in terms of harnessing the wind. And they require fewer turbines, less of a footprint than onshore. That is an advantage to going offshore. They don't cause as much disruption to human activities. As we all are very aware, there is a certain amount of NIMBY, not in my backyard.
Yes.
Associated with the installation of wind turbines. For a guy like me, clearly I have my bias. I love them. I think they're beautiful. I want to look at thousands of them. That doesn't necessarily mean that everybody else wants to look at that number of turbines. Put them offshore, they're 10 kilometers, 15 kilometers out on the horizon. You don't even see them. A little bit less objection, I think, in general. Next slide, please. So this is a slide that addresses the issue of the transmission offshore versus onshore. There's this preconceived idea that the cost of building the infrastructure for offshore wind power far exceeds the cost of building the infrastructure for onshore. And in actual fact, that is not necessarily the case. What is of interest, though, is the top slide showing how the undersea cable gets laid.
Yes.
That is a significant cost associated with going offshore. I think it's a 12%. Right? Actually, I can't remember exactly the percent, but it makes up, 10, 15% of the cost in general. The actual financing and the engineering and the procurement and the project management makes up 15%. And then the substations and all of the infrastructure required to get the turbines offshore makes up another 20%. But the wind turbine generator manufacturers are the end game winners in terms of who makes the money on the deal. 30% goes towards the turbine, and 8% goes towards the installation, and 13% goes towards the foundation. That's about half of the cost, just going to the turbine itself. And the picture on the right is just to sort of give the people that are on the call today the reference as to exactly how big these offshore wind turbines are. So you can see there's a picture of a Boeing airplane in green above the smaller, so-called smaller onshore wind turbines versus an offshore wind turbine that would be, say, 10, 12, 15 megawatts in size. Each blade of the offshore wind turbine exceeds the length of an airplane. A jet airplane. So this is not a small piece of equipment, and certainly the people that work on the rigs that go offshore to do the installations are, let's just say there's a certain amount of risk and danger pay associated with the installation of these things. Next slide, please.
Yes.
Sorry, I have to catch up on the slides myself now. So I think that this is the slide that says top offshore developers global.
Exactly.
I wanted to throw this slide up so that everybody can see where the technology is made, where it comes from. Denmark, sadly, does not show up on there. But rest assured, they actually do have a good share of the market, and they operate manufacturing facilities in Germany, in China, in other countries. A lot of their design work and engineering work gets done in the country itself, and then they export the license to manufacture to other nations. But when it comes to offshore, the big players are going to be the UK and China. There will be other countries that sort of slide in there. France, we talked about France earlier. And the names to watch for are companies like Ørsted, Vattenfall, Iberdrola, Innogy, Equinor. These are developers that I run into frequently at conferences, and they are, they're always reminding me that they're going to be going offshore. They're looking more to the ocean than to land. Next slide, please.
Yes.
Here you can see the top global wind turbine makers as of 2019. And So Vestas is a Danish company. They're number one. And then Siemens Gamesa, and then you can go through the list. And the Chinese manufacturing companies are catching up. They're doing actually quite a good job of understanding how the technology works and building the machines themselves. A lot of their products are for domestic consumption. They don't export necessarily to other countries around the world. Mm-hmm. And then, as of February 2021, the most powerful wind turbine that has received customer orders is for a 13 megawatt GE wind turbine. But I can easily foresee, if I could make some predictions, I could easily foresee a 1 megawatt gain on the size of the turbine over the next 8 years. So, I mean, you could be looking at a 20 megawatt offshore wind turbine quite easily by 2030, just making some predictions. Mm-hmm. Next slide. So the slide is called How It All Looks in 2050. President Biden is pretty bullish on making sure that 30 gigawatts of wind turbine gets installed in the United States and 110 gigawatts by 2050. These are lofty ambitions. But what matters is that there's actually a target, that people are actually putting themselves out there and saying, hey, this is what we want to do, for better or for worse. And my predictions are that, and it's all based on the IRENA forecast for installation of generating assets around the world up to 2050, that the big winners are going to be wind, and that solar will actually surpass wind. There will be growth in geothermal, biomass, and hydro assets. Hydro is great for a country like Canada, for example. I mean, mm-hmm. We get 60% of our power from hydroelectricity. But a lot of those assets, as they come to the end of their life cycle, will be replaced by wind, solar, power storage, and that the net losers likely will be coal, oil, gas, nuclear. I don't even know if it's necessarily if it's economics, if it's optics, if it's environmental, if it's a combination of all of the above. The one thing that I do know is that me as a person, I would like to see the transition happen. Of course, I don't want to have the economies of entire nations being jeopardized by too rapid of a transition. But I think change is good in general, just from my own personal perspective.
Wonderful point. Maybe we can quickly come back to that in the questions in the end.
Sure. Last slide. Because we're talking specifically about floating offshore turbines and the future that may or may not have in our economy, I thought a diagram of what the different types of floating turbines look like from a design point of view. I thought that it would be good just to put some visuals up there. There are, I'm going to guess that there are maybe 10, 15, 20 companies in the world that maybe would have the engineering and manufacturing and design expertise to pull off or execute on any one of these floating barges. It's just a very specialized niche place to be. And I myself have not had too many interactions with any of these companies that build the floating offshore platforms. But when I look at pictures like this, I get excited, and I think that the future will be unique, to say the least. And that's it. That's the end of my presentation.
Wonderful, wonderful, Christopher. Many thanks for sharing. I would just keep the slide on, if that is okay for you, and
Sure.
just quickly go into the questions. So I got one question in the duration of our talk, which was especially considering. You mentioned some risks in terms of the installation. What are the specific risks that could, pop up or occur during installations? What did you mean with this one? Is it particular for workers working in this area, or are there any broader risks to be aware of?
I was specifically referring to risk of humans being killed on the job site. They typically they try to bring out guys that are ex offshore oil drill rig workers to install these platforms for the offshore wind turbines, but there's just a shortage of skilled workers in general. So, you know, if you have one person on the team with whatever, 20, 30, 40 years of experience, that's awesome. If you have 10 guys out working, they all have less than 2 years of experience, that's maybe not such a good scenario. So there's gonna be a significant amount of catch up and training, investment dollars that has to go into worker safety.
Worker safety, education, upskilling,
Yeah.
training. Okay. Okay, I would then, it's a very interesting point, and actually during these discussions that we have on Frogeex and on this Frogeex Green Tech Talk series especially, I mean, education is a word that comes up, I would say, in every second call. Basically, it's somehow connected to education. There is a missing part or investment needed in this area. Eventually, it's just, you know, a lifelong process, and it's because we are also in the period of time where we're going to learn a lot of new stuff, apply a lot of new technology, have some experiences that are maybe not so common or we did not have before. Maybe that's why the need is even stronger for educating, and it's also connected to your point, which you mentioned previously in terms of transition and enabling the transition, actually. So it's strongly connected to that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm thinking just on a project specifically that I've been involved with now for 2 years. It's a solar project in Africa, and I mean this idea of transition of knowledge and transition of skills and training. It is like the top of the list. Everything stems from that, because the people that I work with, they know that if you don't have your crews educated and understand what the technology is, that the whole thing's going to fall apart. So we think, of course, that if only we would just build these projects in Europe, maybe that's better. That somehow the European or the North American workforce can deal with this transition so quickly. But I think that we're misleading ourselves a little bit. There's just, if you're going to ramp up at that scale and start building tens of gigawatts or hundreds of gigawatts of offshore wind power every year, you're going to need people. So anyway.
I mean, it's a wonderful point and a great bridge actually to the next question, which is actually you merged both. You managed to merge both in one. So my first question was you mentioned, or we especially looked at the developments in Europe, and especially in your presentation on the nice map that you shared with us, and as well on this New York project, this Manhattan project. So what are the moves or the developments that you see globally? I mean, is there any specific region that is, very much progressive in this area? We heard about some countries where the technology is coming from, which are investing potentially also some more money into not only producing for their own demand, but eventually also developing further the technology. So I have another question to that. I don't want to mix it all up, but how does it look geographically? Are there any regions that are extremely fast forward? Maybe you can tell us more on this.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, just if I could, sort of roll my eyes into the back of my head and then make a map of where I believe the transition will happen the most or soonest. I would say Japan, South Korea, China, Taiwan. Taiwan has this plan. I'm not even sure if the rest of the world knows exactly what their plan is, but I think it's quite aggressive. Like, I think that they want to be 100% renewable by a certain year. And so to that end, they have, tens of gigawatts of offshore wind power being planned. I know that the Baltic countries are quite aggressive about going offshore. I think, if I'm not mistaken, the Estonia is planning for 1,000 megawatts. Latvia is planning for 1,000 megawatts offshore. And Lithuania has a nuclear reactor that's aging. I believe that they are also now in discussions about taking some of their power assets offshore. These are the countries that come to mind immediately. I'm sure there's others.
Wow, I mean, also very interesting that you mentioned. I mean, all of them. These were only offshore projects that you were thinking of, or was it wind in general, investing in wind?
No, these are countries that have specifically came out and said they want offshore. They don't want small turbines onshore. They just want everything offshore.
So is it a specific, because we know coastal area, you need to, apparently in the sea, you save space on land. I mean, you can utilize it in different matters. But what about the other countries? You mentioned France now, eventually Italy as well. All these coastal countries. I mean, do you hear or see activity over there? Are you aware about projects over there? And what about also Latin America?
I'm not aware of much activity happening in Latin America. And I do business in the region, so it's just maybe something that is really low on the radar that I'm not aware of. The announcement from France actually came as a rather large surprise to me, because I believe for decades they had been saying, well, we get 90% of our power from nuclear. Why should we bother? We don't need this. And then all of a sudden there's this quick departure. a change in policy. And Italy, I don't know much about what's happening in Italy, but I'm sure that they are looking into it. And it's just it seems to me as if it's a it's almost as if it 20 or 30 years ago there were lots of people doing R&D on how to get these wind turbines into the sea. And then 10 years ago, people started putting their money on the table and saying, okay, well, we can do this. And then 5 years ago, they discovered, after owning and operating and running some of these assets in the sea, that, oh, okay, they're actually doing better than what we thought. They're producing more power, less maintenance, and it's, the formula is working. And so now you see this ideas of massive growth. Of course, with massive growth comes massive change, and then you need, and we talked about this earlier, you need people to make that change. And I think that's really going to be the bottleneck. It's just, where do you find all these people? I mean, they could, when they were doing offshore drilling for oil, they had trouble finding guys that wanted to be out on the oil platform in the middle of the ocean drilling for oil. They paid them a lot of money to do it. Now, where are you going to find all of these people to go out into the sea and put these wind turbines in the sea?
And maybe just to also add another point into the discussion, we saw in your presentation as well some key figures. What are the projections to achieve a certain percentage covered by wind or solar? What are the big winners, as you call them? And this was, if I remember that right, it was a global perspective. Now, when we talk also, I know you're from Canada, but you also mentioned President Biden's administration and the ambitious targets that they are having, ambitious policies that they are now initiating to get some movement over there. Is there any projection, any target that they want to, with the projects that they have scheduled for wind, also eventually in Canada? Is there a projection of a target which you want to achieve in terms of energy coming from wind by the year, and if so, do you see this being on track? Or
I think that the projections that are being made now will fall short. I don't believe that.
In which matter? Maybe just to elaborate on that one.
Sorry?
They will fall short. In which matter? I mean, is it going to be?
Well, if the government of the United States is calling for, I can't remember what the exact number was. It was 400 gigawatts or 110 gigawatts.
Yeah. Exactly, 110. Yeah.
So I think, I mean, I don't want to be like a naysayer, but in my mind, I think that if they reached half of this number, it would be monumental. It would be like wow, we in Canada, we started installing wind turbines in 2005. So we're now quite a ways into this, but the actual amount of energy that Canada as a country gets from wind power is still nominal. It's like I don't know, it's like 6%, 7% or something like this. But there were, at the time, there were these projections. There was like, oh, we're going to do this and we're going to do that. And then there'll be this over here and there'll be that over there. And then people all of a sudden realized, oh, what if they don't want it? Or what if it's not? I mean, there was even a guy, I'm not going to name the company, but he managed to get a license to build offshore wind turbines in Lake Ontario. very exciting. This is, this is 10 years ago. And by way of lawyers, courts, and litigation, over a 2 or 3 year period, they basically destroyed this guy and his company. When I say they, I mean the municipalities nearby where the development was going to be. And they put an end to it. They said no, and even the government of the United States was involved, because the wind turbines were going to be sited or situated not quite at the border of the United States, but quite close to it. And then they were like, no, we don't, we don't want that. So what makes sense, or what seems to make sense to to myself and my cohorts in the renewable energy industry, does not necessarily make sense to the vast majority, I don't think. But then when you have conversations with these same people and you say to them, oh, all right, well, we won't put the array of turbines over here. We won't put 50 wind turbines over there in the water. Instead, we'll build a coal power facility, a gas power facility, or we'll put a small nuclear reactor in your community. These same people will tell you, no, we don't want that either. I mean, the long and short of it is that they don't want anything. They just want the transmission lines to bring the power from somewhere over there, somewhere else. They'll pay for the power, but that's the extent of it. They don't want to be a part of the program.
Oh, that's an interesting point that you make. And I think that is, again, connected to the following question, which I would have to you. And that is, what is the biggest challenge that you see in the sector in terms of wind energy moving forward? You are in large-scale projects involved mainly. So what do you consider the biggest bottleneck?
I don't believe it's the materials. I don't believe it's the engineering. I don't believe it's the manufacturing. I don't believe that it's supply chains. I think that the bottleneck really is twofold. It's one, winning the hearts and the minds of the people to allow the installations to be accepted or acceptable. And number two, and we talked about it already, the human resources part, getting people trained, getting people to have a skill level that allows them to go to work and not be hurt or killed. I think that this is the two critical issues.
Wow, amazing part. And I also liked that you mentioned it in your response in terms of materials and supply chain. So we had quite some learnings, and it also nicely flows into the whole discussion. We had some learnings from COVID in terms of supply chain. Now we have seen where the technology is coming from. We saw that, okay, UK is somebody centered in or situated in Europe. China is very strong in this matter, also developing components. You mentioned potentially for their own use, eventually also for other markets. How do you see this one? I mean, do you see, is there, yeah, you mentioned it's not really the biggest challenge. Is it a challenge, or do you see potential to improve, or what would you say? What is your perspective on that?
As demand for turbines goes up, and we could extend that to solar panels as well. Doesn't necessarily have to be turbines. So too will the number of OEMs that will be required to build the products to feed the global market. So just by virtue of the supply and demand, China is positioned to be, to take a certain percentage of the global pie. Will they be tier one suppliers? Will they be, will Deutsche Bank people be hopping on airplanes and flying over to China and saying, hey, you know, we have our client now wants to buy made in China. They're not interested in made in Germany anymore. Probably not. But will China be able to step up and say, oh, you know, for example, South Africa has a bid out for a call for 2,000 megawatts, and they're agnostic. They don't really care where the turbines are made. They just care about the price. Will China be able to step in? Yeah, probably. And as long as the growth projections go as we saw in that chart, there will be opportunities plenty for other manufacturers. Of course, there will be attrition. You know, you can't, even in Europe, there have been some, what I thought were just fabulous manufacturers of product who effectively put themselves out of business. They made their product for too high of a cost, or they put too much money in engineering and R&D and not enough money onto the shop floor. It's going, and it will happen in China as well. There will be casualties. But out of that will come a whole new series of companies with very good manufacturing capabilities, and the fact that they're from China may be less and less relevant as time moves on.
Yeah, we saw something over there also in terms of US. So basically, if I understand you right, you expect the production to increase, or also production facilities, manufacturing facilities to pop up more, also distributed across the geographies, not eventually reflecting the current situation in the proportions is what we see now.
Correct. And most countries, most industrialized countries have a made in our country type policy, which affords a certain number of jobs to migrate. I know that that's the case in Canada. I mean, you want to build a wind turbine here? Okay, come and build a wind turbine, no problem. But please make sure that 35% of the wind turbine is made in Canada. If it's not, then go to some other country. It's limiting to the extent that we only have several companies that are willing to deal with us as a country. But there's a little bit of comfort knowing that however X number of megawatts gets built and installed in the country will afford X number of jobs for this region or that region, or so it's a tricky balancing act. You can't ask for 100% of the pie if you're not willing to take the risk. I mean, let's be blunt about this. China is very often willing to take risk. The rest of the world just kind of watches and says, "Oh, wow, look at what they just did." So we can't take that for granted. We have to embrace what is good about the Chinese manufacturing sector and take that to the rest of the world.
Yeah, that's a very good point, and that brings us also to the maybe last or maybe eventually we will have time for one more question. In terms of materials, so in the challenges, feedback, you mentioned several points, and materials were exactly one element that I'm also interested in. I mean, sustainability. We hear more about life cycles of products, of machines. Now, wind turbines are massive machines. We saw a little bit the scale you shared with us on the picture, the comparison versus the Boeing. So how does it look in terms of materials development and investment into circulation? What is the innovation push or need in the segment? I mean, you also slightly mentioned the floating wind turbines, so also already some innovation coming in. Are there eventually, I mean, some innovation coming in terms of material, recyclability, life cycles, and also in terms of technology, like different combinations, for example, or what can you share with us? What do you see? What do you experience?
So I love the subject of recyclability. The wind turbine industry has been guilty of not doing enough to recycle. Just sell the expired components for scrap, and then have it go to a yard and get crushed and melted down. And I mean, come on, if you're pumping out tens or hundreds of thousands of these things, then you have to be accountable for where the components are going. So to that end, Vestas is, much to their credit, they are the first wind turbine manufacturing company in the world to declare that by 2030, they will recycle every single piece of their turbine. They will not be going to third parties to ask them to salvage and scrap. No, they will be taking everything, bringing it back to their facilities and making it happen. They will, if they have to melt it down again to rebuild it, they'll do it. If they can find a way to take the old fiberglass from the blades, because the blades make up 22 or 23% of the cost of a whole wind turbine. It's just the blades. Blades are made out of fiberglass. If they have to take that fiberglass and run it through a shredder and then turn it into pellets, and then take those pellets and melt them down to turn it back into blades, that's what they're going to do. So there are people in the industry who are aware of the fact that this needs to be addressed. In terms of supply chain issues, there is one issue that could be the nail in the coffin of the of some of the people in the wind turbine industry if they don't handle this properly. So on a direct drive machine, you have coils, you have magneto coils. It's like magnets, okay? And then on a non-lubricated machine, on a machine that just runs on free floating magnets, in other words, no gearbox, no oil, the machine needs these magnets in order to be able to operate. The magnets make up, I don't know what it is, it's like 2% of the cost of the turbine or 1%. It's a very, very small cost of the turbine. But without the magnets, you can't make the electricity. And the magnets are made out of rare earth minerals, rare earth elements. And those rare earth elements to date are only found in China. So if we need to find, basically, I mean, steel is steel, fiberglass is fiberglass, copper is copper. There's a lot of stuff that goes into the turbine that can be found anywhere and everywhere. But these rare earth minerals that go into the magnets, that's an issue. I mean, that has to be, there are geologists looking for those deposits. They think that they might find them in Canada, they might find them in Brazil, but so far, China is the only country that's really got them. There you go, there's a bottleneck.
Wow, so I mean, quite an interesting point towards the end of the discussion. So still some points coming together. Well, I do not have any other questions also from the audience. We have managed to go through all of them also in a reasonable time. So Christopher, is there anything you would like to still give on the way to eventually representatives of countries that may have a chance to listen to our episode, to this episode, of Frogeex Green Tech Talk on energy, on wind energy application, especially in the offshore segment, to just what to consider and what eventually to look at, not to forget about when going into the transition and planning for a solid transition for their country.
I would like to say two things. One, if it has been done, it can be done again, and it can be done better. So when you look at products that are made anywhere, made in Germany, made in China, made in India, made in the United States, when you look at a product and you say to yourself, I want this product to come into my country or my jurisdiction, you should bring the best minds of your country, the top engineers, the top scientists, the top people in government, get them all involved to see if you can take that and turn it into your own and make an even better version of what is being made. Because I think we assume sometimes that, oh, if it's made in Germany, it's the Mercedes-Benz, we can't make it any better. They're the best. Well, yeah, they are the best, but we can still make improvements upon existing systems. So that's the first thing I'd like to say. The second thing is that to dream and to be able to see and fathom the future is a very powerful tool. In 1987, I was sitting on a train traveling from Germany to Denmark, and I saw a wind turbine. And I remember that day very clearly because I had looked at my friend who was with me in the train, and I said, I think one day I'm going to work on these machines. And he looked at me and said, are you crazy? Like, this is like science fiction. It doesn't even exist. I said, no, it does exist. Look, it's right there. I can see it. It's beautiful. Like it's technology. So, it doesn't matter where you are at what stage of your life, if you see something that makes sense or that you believe can change the future, then you should invest time and energy in that thing. Because you're not alone. Other people are thinking the same thing. You just need a critical mass of people doing the same thing to make it happen. So that's the only thing I can really impress upon. And that has less to do with the presentation and more to do with just being human, I think.
That is a wonderful ending, a wonderful conclusion of this call. And I have to say, I enjoy watching wind turbines as well. It's pretty fascinating for me, just the movement. And whenever I see them, it gets me. So I'm not quite sure what is it about them, but I'm pretty hopeful we'll see more of those around in the coming years. So with this, I would close the call for today. It was a great pleasure, Christopher, to have you in this call, in this episode of Frogeex Green Tech Talk, dedicated to wind energy. I hope we will eventually have a chance to follow up on this, maybe at a more detailed format, looking at specifics. Let's see what topics may come up. And I encourage everybody from the audience to have a look on Canwindpower. Certainly a strong player in terms of wind energy offshore segment, as what we mentioned in the beginning. And follow Christopher on LinkedIn or any other channels that you may come across. And you will certainly find a reference also in the materials that will follow and be shared after this call. So thank you very much, Christopher. It was a great pleasure.
Merci, gracias, danke, tschüss, thank you.
And all the best to you in the next Frogeex Green Tech Talk. My name is Jana Skokan. I'm the co-founder of Frogeex, and I'll be with you also for the following episodes. Bye-bye.